Hey everybody, and welcome to the Growth Experience Podcast. I am your host, Chris Dye. Our hope is that by listening to this podcast, you realize that you have a gift. And by believing in your gift, you can uncover your purpose and have vision for your life. Whether you're listening in your car, at home, or watching on YouTube, thank you for tuning in, and let's go! What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 20 of the Growth Experience Podcast. Really excited about today. Thank you guys for being here. I'll introduce you in just a moment. Before we get started, I do want to recognize Community Land Title for sponsoring this episode. Community Land Title is a full-service land title and escrow settlement provider here to protect your real estate investments. When you work with their knowledgeable team, you'll be guided through the process in a transparent and timely way. Just as I say every single week, they are an integral part of our business for our real estate clients, and they always accommodate us in however way we ask. So if you're looking for a title company, if you're a real estate agent, or even if you just have title questions about your home, please reach out to Community Land Title, formerly Rocket Title Group, and they will be able to help you with whatever questions you have. And without further ado, today we have Dave and Jennifer Collie with Hospitality Matters. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us to the Growth Experience.
That's
We're
right.
excited about being here.
Absolutely. I know that you're going to provide a lot of value and help all of us, whether you're in the room or listening, be able to grow in the practice of igniting the practice of hospitality. So,
Well, we hope so.
yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for the invite. Yeah, we're excited about being here.
It's my pleasure, honestly, and you guys have done so much in helping me and our family and how we interact with people. We'll get into a little bit about how we met, but first I just want you to kind of introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your organization.
Okay, yeah. I'm Dave. This is Jen, and we are part of Hospitality Matters. We're part of a group of people across the country that really feel like connecting people in our places really is what's going to change our culture for the better.
Right.
And so we kind of started brainstorming 4 or 5 years ago what that could look like, and started realizing like, hey, we need to give people some resources and offer training.
Mm-hmm.
We say go love your neighbor or connect with somebody, but oftentimes we don't know how to do it well.
Right.
And so we thought, okay, well, let's just give some people some tangible tips and tricks to do that.
Sure.
And some ways for them to process with other people in a room.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen some amazing things happen through that.
Love it. So where did you get started with, 4 or 5 years ago?
Oh, we'll just go with the 4 or 5 years. I was
Sure.
like, where did we get started? Well, that goes way back.
Yeah.
But we actually were just doing things in our neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and really had a lot of friends who were just saying, hey, we should do this somewhere else, or we should do this more. And so some of the folks at our church had asked, could you lead a workshop or do something with our church or our community? And so that's really, I think, the first time we said, hey, we're going to put this together. I take that back. There was before that, another neighborhood. We had started some similar conversations. But particularly when we were in California, we did a workshop with our church and then just kind of the surrounding community. And even in that workshop, there were several people at the end that said, oh, I feel like my business needs to hear this, or I feel like our church needs this, or I feel like, the schools could really benefit from understanding how, even kids could interact and create welcoming environments in their school. And so we kind of ask ourselves that question of, well, is there a way we could share this with other people?
Mm-hmm.
And so we really just started doing it kind of on our own with some friends and, getting some ideas bounced off and planning some events, other workshops and trainings. And it really grew from there, because then there were people that started saying, hey, how can I be a part of this? Can I donate to your organization? We're like, well, we don't really have one yet. And so Dave did a lot of great research in, what it means to be a nonprofit and how to go about doing that.
Yep.
And so we put together a board and did all the legal work of creating a nonprofit so that really it could be a broader impact. And that really was what I think what it grew from, was just a realization that God had given us this piece to share, but he had also given us people who wanted to share it with us. And so we started Hospitality Matters, and I really kind of just continued to grow. Our board has grown from just a few folks in California and one in Kentucky to now we have board members that are in Austin, Texas, and in Maryland, and then also California, Kentucky, kind of a span across the U.S. And so that has been a really exciting thing to see grow.
I love that. I love it. And I can't wait to, I've already talked to my mom, talking about nonprofit status and how all that works. I've done a lot of the same research, and we were just approved mid-May for our 501c3 nonprofit status. It only took 2 weeks,
Wow.
which is bananas from what I hear. So we're really excited about that as well, and we can't wait to have you come speak with our organization and staff there as well. I want to hit on a couple different things that you said. It seemed like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were doing this practice, you were practicing these things within yourselves, your own family, your own neighborhoods, and then for some reason it was contagious, right? Somebody caught on to that, and they just felt like, man, this really needs to spread. More people need to do this. More organizations need to do this. Why do you feel like something like that, the community aspect and connection with people, why do you feel like that's contagious?
I think we like to identify with our place,
Sure.
whether we want to admit it or not. And so sometimes we identify through complaint,
Mm-hmm.
And then you tell your friends about your neighborhood or your different
Venting.
place and just venting about
Right.
what you wish it could be or different things like that. And I think people want to have something that they own and have a part of. And in the mundane, go to work, raise your family, go to sports, attend church, whatever that might be, I think sometimes life can become very monotonous.
Mm-hmm.
And you could actually just kind of live your life in a neighborhood and never feel connected or rooted to that place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we offer is a place to, in that mundane, begin to experience rootedness, excitement about what could be. I think we say a lot about it with hope, like the word hope, of like, what do you hope for this place? And what do your neighbors hope for this place? And could you guys collaborate together to make those hopes a reality?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is then on a Saturday night or a Wednesday morning or a Saturday when you're out and about walking your dog, there's a different perspective of your place. And so even I think one of our big experiences was we moved into a neighborhood in California. It was an HOA, but it was kind of spread all over this mountainous terrain. There weren't sidewalks, there weren't lights at night. They're very dark. It was very eerie. There was wild animals running around and bears getting into our trash cans. But there was this common place where there was this pool and playground, and over the years it had just become run down. It actually was closed when we got there.
Oh, wow.
And we just kind of started talking to neighbors, and the motion was already kind of happening, but the neighborhood gathered around and recreated and redid this whole pool area. And I remember Jen and the kids one day when I was at work, there was this area where they wanted grass to be, and it was just dirt and rocks. And the kids were like, well, what can we do? And they were probably 5 and 7 at the time.
Yeah.
And Jen and the kids spent a few hours just walking around and picking up rocks so that they could plant grass. And what was interesting was it transitioned from this is a place or the pool, that when it opened, it was our pool. And I think the transition of that, when we offer that to people in their place, whatever that might look like in their neighborhood or in their neighborhood or at their job or at their church, when there's ownership and buy-in, there's just something that switches in our hearts and minds where we go from competition to collaboration. And when that happens, there's just this new excitement about life and just the experience that was yesterday very mundane to today very exciting.
Right.
And full of adventure. And I think when we started just modeling that and experiencing ourselves, other people, like you said, they wanted it as well.
Yeah.
And so we just started talking about it.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And you were kind of, not even necessarily thinking about starting an organization, but people said kind of pushed you into that. And I think that's, or rather pulled. I kind of make that reference like,
yeah, I think it was pulled.
God doesn't necessarily push you into anything. You feel that pull, right? And so that's something I say often. And competition versus collaboration, that's something we talk about in the business world, real estate world quite a bit. We're all competitors technically, but we I like to get people together and just see how we can help other people, right? Which is essentially what you guys do, which is awesome. So talking about, the inception of Hospitality Matters and where you started, what kind of challenges or trials have you faced doing something like this? Because sometimes, there's a rub there. It's like, what are they doing? Cleaning up our pool? Or, I don't know. Is there anything that has stood out to you in terms of whether it be at the beginning or even along the way, just some different challenges and trials of trying to connect people to one another?
Do you have anything come to mind?
I don't know if this would necessarily be a challenge, but something maybe that even in our language and our communication of what is hospitality, that I feel like we've kind of run into.
Yeah.
That sometimes, even while there are groups that are like, oh, we want this, and could we have more of this? There are probably an equal number of people that are like, we've already got this, we know, or we don't want this. We're fine just living in our home, not knowing our neighbor. And I think sometimes the challenge is not just helping people know how to love their neighbor, but the desire sometimes to
that's good.
to want that.
Yeah.
And to see that not only is it something really good, but it's really essential.
Right.
It's really like how we survive as people is to be connected to the other people that surround us. And so I think sometimes the challenge is communicating that the practice of hospitality isn't just like, oh, let's be really good at having a nice meal or throwing a party and people want to come, but that it really is this everyday in and out kind of life where you welcome people, where you look up outside of your little zone and notice that there's someone else walking through life there too, and maybe there's a way that you guys can help each other.
Yeah.
And that you could also welcome people into your experience of life, and you could be willing to step into theirs. And I think that is a bit of a challenge even for us, because I think we do tend toward the selfish nature, just as humans, that we are concerned about, how much money we have and if we have enough energy to do this and what kind of mess is this going to create. And so I think there have been places where we've been challenged to step out of that and to say, oh, there's something more that we could do here, or there are people that we need to consider, or also we need to be the ones receiving something, and we need to be willing to do that. And so I think that's been a growth, just personal growth, but also as an organization figuring out how do we share with other people what this is really about, and that this is more than just an event. This is more than just have a nice, charcuterie board. Did I say that right?
Better know I said it. That's
a fancy food, display, but that it really is about loving people well and caring enough to be outside your own place to see them.
Right. And I love that you said that as far as helping people obtain the desire to want to do that, right? Because, looking at myself, I'm an outgoing person. I can connect with just about anybody, but admittedly so, there's been a lot of surface level connections and conversations of, even people that I maybe would have liked to have been closer to, but just didn't maybe have the tools, or the desire wasn't deep enough to kind of dive into that. And so, you're talking about neighbors that maybe they've lived in that neighborhood for 20 years, and Saturdays they wash their car and cut grass, and Sundays they go to church, and then they go out to eat with their family, and then they come home, and then they go to work Monday through Friday, right? And so I feel like that can be a challenge. That can be a challenge as far as helping people understand that need for connection and community. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think our culture just speaks to more of the competition, the individualistic side of things. And I think for us, when we talk about the difference between competition and collaboration, it's really just walking around with a learner's heart. Competition says, I'm better than you, and I'm going to prove it. And I think collaboration says, hey, there might be something I need from you, and I think I have something to offer to you.
Right.
And together we can be better.
Right.
And I think that shift itself is not necessarily part of our culture. And so when we talk about it, there is this language barrier in some ways to what we're saying. Because I think deep down, people probably do desire deep connection, but they really don't know how to get it. And so for us, we really focus a lot on our trainings about helping people imagine what that could be.
Sure.
Instead of just saying, hey, go out and do this
Mhm.
because you're supposed to, giving them some tools to kind of say, well, what is? Considering what the other possibility could be, suspending some of that judgment that we make right off the bat.
Right.
And anyway, it's been really kind of fun to see people kind of catch that spark and
Yeah.
their eyes light up and
Mhm.
they're ready to go all of a sudden.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we all do that, right? With like, you might see that neighbor and judge how their yard looks and be like, oh, I'm not going to go, conversate with them because they don't take care of their stuff, or whatever that might be. And I remember you telling a story, I believe, and I'll let you take it from here because I love it. But you had a neighbor that had a situation in California. They maybe used to walk by their house, and then they had overgrown grass, and then one day you just went and knocked on the door and realized their full situation, and were able to, like you said, they have something, you have something to offer them, but a lot of times they have something to offer you as well. And so you were able to help that person and help them take care of their yard. And I love that. I mean, that's stuff that, for the audience, we were neighbors for a couple years. And so you guys taught us, how to have a full-fledged conversation with your neighbor, right? Rather than just, hey, good night,
Yeah, it's easy to wave. It's
Right.
easy to say hi.
Right. From
It's
your
harder
own,
to stop and
from
actually
your own
change your
boundaries.
pattern and your rhythm and your schedule.
Right. Oh, I love that. Okay, so getting started. Now we've got several board members across the United States. What was the vision when you first started, and how has that developed?
Wow. I mean, the vision up front was, well, we didn't really know.
Yeah.
We were kind of being challenged a little bit to take this to someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the beginning kind of understanding was like, okay, let's take this to somebody
Mm-hmm.
who needs it the most.
Mm-hmm.
And we originally thought churches, that was kind of our first target.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've grown and as we've talked and dreamed and planned and kind of started creating resources for different people, leading workshops, we felt like it was kind of narrow. Yeah, churches need that, but those churches are also influential in businesses, schools,
Right.
universities, and so all of a sudden there was this conversation of like, well, how can we offer this to college students and teach them how to do this in a dorm environment that maybe is very conducive at the time to learning how to build community, be with people, get to know your neighbor, which is just dorms.
Mm-hmm.
But then how do we also train them to take that to their new job and their new apartment or their new neighborhood? And I think the more we started doing that with schools and middle schools and seeing just the impact that an 8th grader catching that vision could do in their own school of like, oh, there's a lot of kids that sit by themselves at lunch.
Right.
I wonder why.
Mm-hmm.
And being willing to get excited about going and talking and learning those stories. That the vision kind of went from, okay, let's just talk to Christians or just churches,
Mm-hmm.
to these principles affect businesses. They affect neighborhoods and HOA. Like there's people that want their neighborhood to be better, but they don't know how to do it. And so
Right.
it's kind of gotten very, very wide. We're kind of bringing it now back a little bit because I think we were trying to touch everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and that's probably just
That's
a little
really
bit too big, too
Sure.
fast. And so we kind of narrowed that back down a little bit. But the hope and the heart for it is we believe that the little things make all the difference. And so if we can just train people around us
Mm-hmm.
to begin considering and imagining and cultivating those good little rhythms,
Mm-hmm.
that it really will lead to collaboration for the good of the place.
Right.
And so that's kind of the vision right now. So like really like kind of streamline back down to a few
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, how do we do this really well?
I think sometimes too, just serving out of our gifts that we bring, because there's lots of ways that you can inspire and equip people to do things. I think for us, training and coaching and equipping has kind of been one of those things that has recurred throughout our lives. And so what started as like a workshop where people gathered, and we did more of kind of interactive teaching training, has also kind of broadened to how we teach and communicate and encourage others through different media. From we have a podcast that we do, or we send out kind of written work that people can either read and kind of take and apply, or even just resources where it's like, actual leader guides that they can lead other people in things and kind of passing it on that way. And really just trying to figure out, what are some things that we can contribute, that we can do. Like Dave's really great at making amazing coffees. Turns out I'm not so great yet. I'm still working on that. But even in how we serve in our neighborhood,
right.
when we do our coffee cart on Saturday mornings, I'm probably not the one that you want to make your latte, but I will make you a scone, and it's
oh man, those scones
fun.
Are so good. They are so good.
I think she brings up a good point that really, you're asking about vision. I think for us, we were trying to do a lot of the training and try to drum up these like events where we could come and give our time and our passions. And really the last probably year or so, the board's really kind of reeled us back in a little bit and said, well, these things are really good. What if everyone could have it? And so really kind of leaning into the resources and creation of resources that could be multiplied, where we could send what we're doing and how we're training to anyone, anywhere, and they could lead this in their own community without us, is really the dream. I mean, our heart is to change the nation toward the better, right? Where everyone is walking around and wanting to collaborate and learn from each other and make their place better, and we can't do that by ourselves.
Right.
And so we can do our part in our place.
Yeah.
And we want to empower and give resources to people in their place.
Sure. Well, you've certainly affected us, and we just recently moved from Bardstown, where we met, the bourbon capital of the world.
Yeah, we miss you already, by the way.
Oh, thank you. We miss you guys too. Olivia asked about you on Saturday. Are we going to go get coffee? It's an hour and a half, babe. I don't think we're going to go get coffee today. But maybe one time we'll plan it out and be able to come back down there. But and talking about rewinding a little bit more, talking about your kids, right? How even that match was lit for your children. Talking about 8th graders, high schoolers, college kids. Whatever that looks like. Everybody is the term influencer now is so broad. About, well, if you've got 10,000 plus followers on your Instagram, then you're an influencer. Everybody has influence. And so it just matters who they're in contact with and, what habits and things they do on a daily basis. And the practice of hospitality is a great habit to build. And you've certainly affected us in that. And, it was cool because we have a new office for our team in real estate. And one of the first things I wanted to do was go around to all the neighbors and knock on their doors and say, "Hey, I'm Chris. We're your new neighbor," and just introduce myself. And even though I'm an outgoing person, which I stated before, I never would have done that a couple years ago. So,
which is really neat because we won't probably get to meet your neighbors,
right.
Or new neighbors,
right?
But
exactly.
you will.
Yep.
And I think that's been true. Even for our kids, that we've recognized that there are people that they will connect with and influence that we probably won't cross paths with near as often.
Yep.
I'm not in AP calculus with my son, at school.
Right.
He's with those people and interacts with them. And so in some ways, the ability to give somebody that spark or that training or that tool that they need in their place is really almost more exciting than us being the ones to go do it, because you have giftings and you have places that you are that will never be and never get to use. And so I think that's a really cool thing about the practice of hospitality, like you said earlier, being contagious, is that really it's richer and fuller when other people are doing it in other places, because it really does spread in a way that couldn't if it were just a person or a family doing it.
Yep. Exactly. And everybody has that sphere of influence, right? That we talked about. That's what we call it. Being a sphere of influence who knows you, likes you, trusts you, right? And it's easy to talk to those people or, affect or influence that group, like you said, because, you're not going to go talk to Billy, who's sitting next to, your son in calculus class or, whatever that looks like. And so there's just such a need for that and for your organization and what you do. And I love that you're sharing it with our audience on the show. We're small but mighty. We have some dedicated people that tune in every single week, so I'm excited for them to hear this, because I think, just like you said, just that match. When people hear about it, they want to know more, and I'm excited for people to research you a little bit more. But I also want to talk about you kind of touched on it, but let's talk about some application now, right? Maybe a few tools. You guys do garage coffee and tea out of your garage in the summer, Saturday mornings, and don't, flatter yourself a little bit. These baked goods and the coffee is incredible. Like, both are amazing. You guys don't ask for money. Just donate if you want to towards the purchase of the materials and food. Kelsey and I both were like, man, I'd pay for that cup of coffee, or I'd pay for that scone or muffin. So what are some things that maybe for the person who's just like, I want connection, but I don't really know where to start. And then maybe somebody who is a veteran, outgoing type personality, maybe they know a lot of people. How can they dive deeper?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would start with understanding, you mentioned trust. And I think, what we talk about is we're not talking about doing activities that are just nice and friendly or whatever. And we're really trying to talk about how do you establish a relationship. And relationship is what roots you to a place.
Right.
And relationship is based in trust.
That's so good.
And so I think for us, we talk a lot about just initially before we talk about what you should do as far as living into your passions or offering coffee out of your garage or whatever.
Right.
Be present. Consistently present. Be aware of what's around you. Are you out walking? Are you out, or even when you're driving through your neighborhood, are you head up, looking around, paying attention to the details, what's changing, what's good, what do you not like, and really considering who is that behind that door? Do I want to know them? Do I need to know them? What will it take to get to know them?
Right.
And I think a lot of that comes with, for relationship and collaboration, for someone to jump on board and do something big with you, it takes trust.
Absolutely.
And so I think the trust is built with presence, consistently just being around. People see your face, they recognize you, you say hi. There's this attitude and presence that you carry with you. And those little tiny practices of that consistently over time. We're doing this garage coffee thing. We've been in this neighborhood almost 3 years.
Right.
And we're just now really tipping the iceberg to where we see the bottom of it, right? We start to really see relationships starting to begin flourishing and people really going a little bit deeper.
Right.
And I
You
think
didn't
sometimes
do that until you had, every single day you guys were out walking the neighborhood, talking to neighbors, and, had you not done that and just tried to start this thing,
People would have thought we were probably crazy.
Right. Like,
They might still. But.
Who are these weirdos? They probably poison that stuff, But
well, yeah, and I think that people want to just do a couple things for a couple days or a couple weeks or a couple months, and they think it's going to change. And I think there's this consistency. Like I think even in business, find out what you're going after and do it consistently.
Yep.
And I think that's where you start seeing the growth and you start seeing the change. And so for us, we start with build trust by being present and doing it consistently for a while. And then as you begin kind of leaning into what relationships surface a lot.
Right.
Who are you just because you're out and about, your rhythm? What is it that you see? Who do you see? Are there certain people that you're seeing on a regular basis? Then lean into that a little bit. Why? Are they on the same schedule? Do they have the same passions? And then once you're kind of building that and you have those rhythms, then you kind of start saying, okay, what can I do to make this place better?
Right.
And really asking some hard questions about what does this neighborhood need? Or who do the people around me that I am seeing a lot, what do they need?
Right.
Is there a way for us to offer something to them? Or is there something that we can offer? We do at the coffee shop on Saturday mornings, we have kind of a weekly tip on how to be neighbors. And this week it's about sharing tools. And most likely there's something that you need to do in your yard that you often don't have the tool for. And in America, we're like, well, if we have the money, we'll just go buy it. Or we're going to go rent it if we need it. Most likely someone in your neighborhood has it.
Right.
And so begin building that rapport of can you ask for help? And vice versa. Do you see someone struggling with something that, you have a tool that would help them, offering that and begin collaborating in those little things. Noticing when someone's gone, and their trash cans left out. I know that we were gone a couple weeks ago before you moved out,
Right.
and we had asked our neighbor to put the trash out, and you knew we were gone just because you were present in the neighborhood and you knew what was going on, and you were driving by and saw that our trash cans weren't out at the street yet the night before.
Yeah.
So you walked over and you were offering that service because you recognized, you were considering what was going on around you, right? Your head was up, your eyes were around, and you noticed that need.
Right.
Unfortunately, you got, said, like, you were stealing the glory of our
She walked
neighbor.
across the cul-de-sac whenever I was pulling the cans out. She's like, I was going to do that tomorrow. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to steal your shine, But no, you're right. And it's just kind of like, oh, I know they're gone. I know trash day is tomorrow morning, and just being able to recognize that and felt compelled to pull your trash cans.
But you don't recognize that unless you're present.
Right.
And you're consistent with that. And so be present and build trust
Mhm.
is the first thing. And then just lean into how you can serve and make things better. As you do that, your personal passions, I don't think everyone should do a coffee cart.
Right.
One, not everyone needs to do a coffee cart if someone's already doing a coffee cart.
Right.
Two, there's probably people that are going to make really terrible coffee, and that's just, in my heart, just not good. Don't do that. Don't make bad coffee just to do something that the
You're
Collies
a
are doing.
coffee connoisseur.
But
so.
you find what you're passionate about.
Sure.
What do you love?
Yep.
What do you love to do on Saturday mornings, or what do you want to share with other people when you're in a conversation? What do you find yourself gravitating to talking about?
Right.
How do you invite other people into that
Mhm.
and find a way to do that?
Yep.
But that comes way later than those other things that I mentioned, right? You have to
Right.
build the trust first so that people want to do that with you, and then just learning to serve and make when people know that you're about the good of the place and not your own glory or your own good, then people will jump on with your passions. But often I think we flip that and we just start inviting people to our passion when we haven't built relationship.
And, that's
and
your
people-
passion,
right.
Yeah.
So that would be my quick 3 tips.
Yes.
Well, I was gonna say, and you kind of did something.
Pull those bullets out real quick. No, that was so good.
You kind of did something even in telling about it that I think is part of the practice too. Is you were naming questions, and I think asking lots of questions and then actually taking the time to listen to the answers
Right.
is also a part of that. Whether they're questions to yourself of what is going on here, or how could I help them? You're asking kind of internally. You're asking questions, but also to other people beyond the "Hey, how are you?" question to the I heard you went to the hospital last week. Everything okay?
Right.
Those kinds of questions that lead a little further. And I think, for the deeper part you were asking about, that when we have established trust or we've taken the time to be present and listen, usually what that leads to then are opportunities.
Right.
And I think the challenge is to be willing to step into the opportunity.
Yes.
Because there is risk.
Yep.
Sometimes you step into something, you're like, this was not what I expected we were getting ourselves into.
Right.
Which for us has led a lot of times to hosting families in our home for months at a time that
Yeah.
we were not expecting or felt like we were even prepared to do.
That's
and
amazing.
and yet there were things in that too that were huge gifts to us as far as relationship, but also the privilege of seeing things be provided for that we really hadn't done on our own. That was part of the miracle that was happening around us. To think, oh, I didn't think we had enough money to make that happen, and yet it's covered, and those
Right.
things are taken care of. And so, I think for the deeper part, it is when you notice something that needs to be done, or when you hear of a way that you could partner with somebody, taking the step then to do it and to follow up on it, and then to ask another question and see where that opportunity will lead. And so, in some ways, it's the deeper is really just kind of a series of the next step and the next step. But you have to sort of be willing to take that first step.
Absolutely, yeah. And there is that, I love that you mentioned that, because we talk about just taking that action, right? And a lot of times, or stepping into that opportunity. And if you're just kind of hanging out on the sidelines all the time, and even if an opportunity is presented to you, but you don't actually take it because you think it's not something you'd want to do or be able to connect with, you lose that opportunity to adapt or connect, which a lot of times once you take an opportunity, maybe it's something, you're like, I probably won't do that again. But at least now right? And and you help somebody, or, I don't know, you went out on that limb, which very few people do, right, consistently, like you said. And one of my favorite quotes, as you were saying that, it's actually a Bruce Lee quote. It's long-term consistency beats short-term intensity. Because I'm a short-term intense kind of guy. And so I've had to coach myself in how to be consistent. Even this show, for me, is hard sometimes because it's like, okay, every single week I'm showing up and I'm doing this thing. But it's easier because I really just enjoy it. Because I get to talk to cool people like you. But
Well, I think, too, when we're talking about this, sometimes we can paint the picture like it's easy.
right.
And like even you see these people that are really successful in business, but you hardly ever see all of the work for
The
10
background.
years or whatever, the background of that. And I want to make sure that people, when they're thinking about this idea, and we talk about this a lot in our trainings, is it does cost you something. And most likely you're not going to be good at it at first. And that's where the growth is, right? Like we did a podcast with some friends of ours that are on our board, and they began hosting something once a week in their house. And they were really struggling with how hard it was of always being ready and having that expectation of like, I got to have my house clean, I got to be ready at this time, or the meal's got to be ready when they walk in. And there was this consistency that even when it was hard, they didn't give up. It does cost us something to do this.
Right.
And you're going to run into barriers of time and resources and just aptitude, capacity, right? Everyone has different personalities.
Right.
Your capacity is at a level, and you need to recognize that
Mm-hmm.
and lean into it to that point.
Right.
But also know that your capacity can grow,
Can be stretched.
but that growth doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
A lot of people look at us and say, "Oh, well, you're just so good at that. That it's just your personality." It's like, well, my personality is outgoing, but being good at this
It's different.
has taken a long time.
Right.
Right. We've been talking about this for 10 years. The first time I wrote anything publicly was 10 years ago.
That's the growth experience, right? That's
Right.
why I've called that show that name, because the time under pressure, right, to create this diamond that you guys have, it's simple, not easy, right? The
Well, I
concept
think
is simple.
The thing sometimes that we miss is that, and I think about even the way we talked about it this morning, it sounds like, oh, you do this and then it leads to that. But I think there is a consistency of discipline in the growth, that even like planning intentional times,
Yes.
That we look at our calendar at the beginning of the week and we're like, what night do we have to do something with other people in our neighborhood?
Right.
And it's like, you have this consistent podcast. You're like, I'm going to do this at this time and make this happen. And sometimes the practice of hospitality has to be that way too.
Right.
That we intentionally factor in room in our schedule, room in our rhythms and our routines. That even if we don't know right off who we're going to invite or what exactly we're going to do with them, we've already said we're going to do this week.
Right.
And I think that helps with the consistency, is just some intentional choosing that this is something we're going to do.
It's a choice. Yeah.
And then it does cause you then to look and ask the question of, well, who have we talked to this week that we could invite over? Or is there somebody that's doing something we could go join them? And it starts generating that question. But I think the consistency often does come from an intentional choosing to make it a part of your daily life or your weekly rhythm, to insert that. Because otherwise we would probably just end up not doing it.
Sure.
If we don't plan on
It's
it.
if it's not intentional, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I love too, that I want to point out for people that may be listening or watching, that maybe they're like we both said we're outgoing extroverts, right? You mentioned something where maybe an introverted person doesn't feel like this is something that they could do or want to do, or whatever that looks like. But I think the key thing to pull out that you mentioned was people that trust you, right? And you have likes, you have interests, you have passions, you have hobbies that you enjoy. Chances are, if you live in a neighborhood with 300 homes, there's 5 people that enjoy the same stuff, right? Or on the same schedule, or have kids the same age, And so I think it's to uncomplicate it a little bit and just getting started. In order to be consistent, you have to get started. So even in just getting started, finding those people, building that trust, and it does take a little bit of a leap. You notice, somebody has kids that are your kid's age, to be able to go knock on the door and say, hey, I would love to meet you. Or my kids want to play with your kids, right? I think that it's not always about this big grandiose idea, or you have to throw this large party, welcome to the neighborhood type of thing. It's one step at a time.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of myths in that, right? Like, I think we do carry these kind of beautiful pictures in our mind about what this could be, and a lot of people do hear that. We hear a lot of, well, you guys aren't introverts like me, and I want to state.
I think I am.
Yeah, well, and I think what we've talked about is, again, hospitality is not an event, right? It's a way of living toward relationship, and so that is for everyone. We all need relationship. We all need connection to be healthy mentally and physically and emotionally. And if we do it different than an introvert as an extrovert, that's okay. That's who we are. But if you don't do it because you're an introvert, or you don't do it because you're an extrovert, like whatever that excuse is, you're missing out on relationship.
Yeah.
Right? You're missing out on connection,
right.
and being rooted in your place. And so we always say it's going to look really different as an introvert than an extrovert doing these things. But at the same time, there are people that I'm never going to connect with because I'm too over the top. I'm too excited about everything I do.
Yep.
And they're like, I don't want that much energy.
Right.
Some people love labs and some people don't.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they want that dog energy when they come home from work. Other people don't. And I think it's the same way. Like, there's neighbors that don't want that energy from me.
Right.
But they'll connect to a Jen or somebody that's going to ask deep questions and not be over the top, but be really authentically concerned about what's going on in their day. And you're going to connect and build relationships with people that I and you won't ever do.
Right.
And so the world as a whole needs connection, and our place needs that as well, or as much or more than us. And so I think it's a challenge and a myth. Like, hey, don't use that as an excuse. Look at it as an opportunity to meet people that I couldn't.
Right. Yeah, and that's the other thing I talk a lot about on the show, and why I created it is to help people understand that they have giftings. And, sometimes those need to be, they can always be sharpened, but sometimes they need to be uncovered, right? Sometimes you hide your gifting and just because you're going through the mundaneness of life and you don't actually get an opportunity to use your gift, right? Well, this practice of hospitality and relationship allows people to connect with other people that have the same or even similar or different gifts, right? And so I love that, that's kind of at the root of what you guys are talking about. And you've thrown that word a couple times, even just in this conversation of, you have a gift, and being able to connect with other people that have that same gifting is really special. I love, when I would go to Fresh on a whim and I'd see you sitting at the table working, and then us just immediately be able to have a conversation and, talk to each other about life and kids and marriage and all the things, right? So it truly is a special practice, and one that does take work. So I appreciate you guys giving the tools and resources, putting in the work yourselves, and not hoarding it, but sharing it so that everybody can partake in that.
I think that's one of the beauties. It's even actually in the kind of working definition that we have of the practice of hospitality. It's that it's this contribution piece. And, we say that hospitality is a posture of living where we engage other people to draw them out of isolation and loneliness into this place of welcome and safety, so that we know that we have something to offer the world today.
Right.
That all of us do. That the contributions that we make to one another, but also the contributions that we make past that, and the ripple effect that has occurs
that is
because
so
we have connected and met with another human being.
Right.
And I said it jokingly, but like, if people were to take extrovert introvert tests, I would definitely be on the introvert spectrum.
Sure.
So I think that understanding of how the practice of hospitality is a place where we can all contribute and we can learn from one another. And I think it has pushed me in places that I might not even have chosen to be pushed in that way or to be shaped and formed. But I'm so glad that it has.
Right.
And has also given, I think, opportunities to share things from my own place. And I remember working camp one year as a college student, and there was another girl on my staff. And I think about halfway through the summer, she was like, you know what, I'm so glad that you also are a little bit more quiet. Because it was a kids camp, and so everything's over the top, and we're energetic. And I was that, especially when I needed to be. But we would be in like our staff meetings, and I was like, what do you mean? She goes, I think sometimes I just need permission that it is okay to be who I am and listen in this moment. And I was like, yes, of course it is. And I think, we talk about in the practice of hospitality the importance of listening. And I think we all have things to teach each other, that maybe that's not our natural leaning, or maybe it is, but we actually have things we can teach one another about how to be better at that thing.
Right.
That I've learned things from Dave about spontaneity, that, I like to know what's coming and have it planned and have enough resources for everything. And, for him to bring random people home and be like, I found these guys on the side of the road, and do we have enough for dinner? And I'm like, sure we do, yes. And just having the creativity and the spontaneity in that has really, taught me some things about trust and about provision. But also I think the other direction of, me asking questions where he's like, we should think about that. That's probably a good thing for us to do.
Good
I think
questions.
we've learned things from each other in the practice of hospitality, and it's better when we do that for one another. So.
Absolutely. No, I love that. Kelsey and I, we do a series within the podcast called Family Matters. And so we do that once a month. So she's coming on next week for all of our listeners. They love that series. And so we talk about that very thing, how we've stretched each other. And she's the question asker and I'm the risk taker, But we rubbed off on each other, I'll call her every now and then because she's a deal finder. She's our budget maker, all that stuff. And I'll call her every now and then and be like, you'll never believe how much I bought this for, and just like, it's cool how if we allow, even within a marriage, each other to stretch each other, right? I'm going to pull this out of what you just said because we're going to clip it. You have something to offer the world today. I absolutely love that. And, several years ago, Kelsey, I was kind of on the fence and the cusp of trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. I'd just gotten out of the military. I didn't really know what direction I was going, and Kelsey was like, well, "What do you want to do?" And we're just like laying there at night, and I'm like, I want to change the world, and that doesn't again have to be this grandiose gesture, like Tony Robbins feeding 1 billion people. That's amazing. And it's a blessing. And it's a huge gift, but it can be one person, one thing at a time. One ripple at a time, and that's something that you guys provide. Which is awesome.
Yeah, I think she said the word permission. And I think hospitality, when you engage other people and recognize and invite them out of their own world into a world where they feel connected to something else and something bigger than them, you do give them permission to dream and imagine that there is something better.
Right.
And when you start allowing the heart and the mind to dream. We as humans, especially when we have people around us to support us and challenge us, we can do some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And we can really, literally change the fabric of our culture from our neighborhoods and with our neighbors by just giving each other permission to be who you are in your neighborhood. Not trying to change the neighbor that's just yelling at their kids through the window.
Right.
Not changing that, but giving them permission and still loving them and walking with them. And when we offer that, we offer everything.
Yeah. Man, that is so good. I love it. Awesome. Well, is there anything, parting words of wisdom or advice that you would give to myself and to the listeners? Or if not, that's totally fine, but I like to kind of ask at the end, anything that maybe we left on the table that you want to make sure that you speak on.
I would say give yourself permission to fail. We have done this a lot, and we've really made people feel uncomfortable or unwelcome amidst our best tries.
Right.
And we don't get it right every time. The meal isn't great every time. Right? Sometimes it's burnt, or sometimes
I refuse to believe that. I'm sorry. I know you guys, and I'm sure it's on point every single time.
But again, this is a journey, right? Like you're seeing us a little bit well groomed, if you will.
All right.
Right. You met us in a neighborhood this is our, what, 6th or 7th neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Like,
But
this
even
is,
so, I feel like there are things that I still, I'm still working through. I still try it. I'm like, oh, I should have done that different.
Mhm.
And I think you do need that permission for yourself to try it and not get it right, and then do it again.
Yeah.
And you'll do it better.
It's so funny you say that too, because as we're talking, we haven't had a neighbor that was just constantly working. I mean, outside, like constantly. You probably know who I'm talking about. Every single day. And as we're talking, literally during this podcast, a fleeting thought went through my mind of, man, I should have just asked him if he ever needed help. Like, if he ever needed help with anything around, and maybe he'd have said no, but I probably would have asked again, and then maybe I would have helped him spread some mulch or, pressure wash his pool deck at some point, but it's just, would consider that, the failure. However, I believe you only fail if you quit, right? So now that I'm continuing this practice, if I see a neighbor slaving over their beautiful yard every single day, I'm going to ask them next time.
And it's worth it.
It's worth
I think
it.
that's the other thing I would add to that. It is worth it.
Yeah.
And it's worth it to keep trying.
Right.
And practice and try again.
Cool.
For sure.
Is that it? 'Cause that's pretty good. That's a good nugget.
I think, I don't know. I don't know what else to add. And
Yeah.
you brought out a lot today, and it's been fun to just, even for us to speak it and to reiterate some of the things that we just know subconsciously, and when we speak it, it kind of encourages us, like, oh yeah, there's things for us to do when we get home today too.
Yep. So you guys have this hashtag, last thing, be the good in your hood. So maybe just really quickly, what inspired that? I know you've already touched on some things, but it's such a good little hashtag that I think that could inspire a lot of people to be the good in your hood.
Yeah. Well, one thing is, it is, to be clear, it's hashtag be the good in your hood. You said it correctly.
Okay.
We were originally thinking of going with the hood, but again, with this ownership and rootedness, we really want to make sure that it's like hashtag be the good in your hood.
Yeah.
Not just any hood,
Right.
Like, be the good in your hood. Like,
Yeah.
be where you are and be the good there. But our hope was just resource, right?
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to give someone a resource to 15-minute quick thing on their way to work.
Mm-hmm.
What is one tip that I could be thinking about, and how do I be a good neighbor in my place? How do I begin making connections? So we have, little tidbits about how important just getting to know your neighbor's name is.
Right.
To looking around and saying, hey, if I could do one thing, I could plant a flower.
Mm-hmm.
And, we lived in Omaha, probably 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And just a year and a half ago, we got a call from the tenant where we were renting and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know, we still appreciate the tulips that come up every Easter in front of the house you rented. Because we were there and we wanted our place to be pretty and beautiful for our neighbors. And so we planted these tulips that come back every year, and we've left our mark there.
Wow.
And so we give just simple tips on this podcast. We've now this season kind of invited people from around the country that are doing this, and they're giving tips on how they do it. And it's just been really, really fun. So yeah, we encourage people to check out the podcast, hashtag be the good in your hood.
Love it. How else could, maybe somebody's got questions or they want to connect, how can they reach you?
Hospitalitymatters.org. We have lots of resources on there. We also have a monthly or bi-weekly, depending on how we're feeling, something that goes out with kind of some updated what's happening near you.
Sure.
Usually we have some sort of article written by someone, just kind of, again, as a resource of sparking ideas and giving people encouragement. We have lots of different events that we would, workshops and trainings. We also have things that they can purchase. We have parties. It's all on our website.
Yeah.
We have, design parties if you want to connect to your neighbors. We have a mug swap kit, and there's a pre-designed party for you. There's invitations. There's the questions. It's everything you need. Hospitalitymatters.org. Check it out.
Love it. Well, thank you guys so much for coming onto the show. I really, really appreciate it. I'm sure this won't be, I say this with just about every guest, but I'm sure it won't be the last time that we have you. So, again, thank you so much. Look forward to the next time. And just like every other episode, I'll leave you with this. You have a gift. It's time to grow in it.